Some people go through life without ever being truly seen. They don't shout, they don't demand attention, they don't stand under spotlights. But they're the ones holding everything together. I was one of them until the day someone stole my name. And for the first time, I was forced to fight for what was mine. My name is Evelyn Carter, 34, neonatal nurse at St. Michael's Hospital in Baltimore. Every morning, as the city still sleeps under a layer of sirens and soft fog rolling past Patterson Park, I ride my bike past the old iron gate, clutching a thermos and one stubborn belief that small things still matter enough to keep a person standing. My shift starts at 6 a.m. The NICU, home to fragile hearts and shallow breaths, is my world. I'm not a famous doctor. I have no peer-reviewed research or viral TED Talks, but I know how to sing lullabies that slow down an infant's panic, how to touch a tiny hand like it's made of light. Outside these walls, life moves fast, but inside, I'm the stillness, the clean floor no one notices, the hand that catches the fall before it happens. My desk is covered in child psychology books and Polaroids, blurry smiles, survival milestones. I'm not in magazines. I have no followers in the thousands, but I have newborn eyes that see me like I'm their first sunrise. Serena, my sister, is a different kind of woman. She lives in Federal Hill, where smart homes glow like showroom models and front yards follow H-way symmetry like gospel. She sells million-dollar properties, attends charity galas with state pageant winners, and poses in local luxury magazine. People call her the face of urban success, and I'm genuinely happy for her. I am. But sometimes when I visit her new mansion, I pause at the granite staircase and feel cold. Like something is watching me. Not someone. Something. Maybe a shadow. Maybe a warning. We grew up in an Arundel, wooden house, ghost stories from our grandmother every Halloween, and pumpkin pie for Mom. But as we grew older, one of us chose the spotlight. The other chose the shadows. My parents now live retired lives in Annapolis. Dad, a former Navy engineer. Mom, a history teacher. They raised us on truth, told us family was where masks weren't needed. But sometimes the mask gets so perfect, even the one wearing it can't tell it apart from their face. I'm not jealous of Serena. I don't want the mansion. I want my name spelled right. I want to live without having to tuck my real feelings behind my ribs like contraband. At the hospital, they call me the soul of the NICU, because even during a minor earthquake last month, I sang lullabies, kept the monitors calm. But who keeps my rhythm steady? That was before everything collapsed. Before a hidden revenge from the very person I called family took my identity. Before I became one of those revenge stories you read in the darkest corners of family tales and cheating stories, only this one, I'm the one who had to tell it. When you look in the mirror every morning, do you truly see yourself, or just the shadow of someone else's expectations? Not every nightmare waits for you in sleep. Some begin in broad daylight, with a voice from an unknown number saying you're 3 months behind on a mortgage nearing $1 million. And when you say, I don't own a home, they reply, maybe not, but your name does. The call came while I was changing a dressing on a premature baby boy. Evelyn Carter! This is she. We're calling from Wells Financial. You're 3 months behind on the $800,000 mortgage for 105 Lombard Street. I laughed. Not the good kind. The kind that cracks something inside your bones. I don't own a house. I rent a loft near Patterson Park. The property is registered under your name, they said. The loan application, income statements, credit history, everything checks out. And the IP address used to submit, it traces back to Federal Hill. I froze. Federal Hill. The same mansion Serena had just proudly shown off 2 weeks ago. Voice-activated lighting. marble stairs, and that feeling like something was watching me from under the staircase. I called in sick, for the first time in 6 years. Not fevers, not trauma patients, not even my own heartbreaks had ever pulled me from my shift. But that call, it pushed me off the axis of my own life. The bank didn't wait. They laid it all out. Thick folders filled with signatures identical to mine, my social security number, pay stubs from St. Michael's, even an eerily accurate version of my personal email. Close enough to fool a system. Close enough to ruin a life. That's when I realized this wasn't a glitch. This was a plan. It was a true infidelity story, except the betrayal wasn't marital. It was familial. This was a betrayal story that didn't begin with seduction. It began with a USB drive, one that carried my identity like stolen treasure. I had given Serena my ID once. She said it was for a real estate shoot, something about needing it to access the building for staging. I trusted her. I thought she knew boundaries. But people who betray, you never cross the line in one leap. They brush against it, softly, just enough to make you mistake it for love. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I just sat there, eyes wide open. The light in my apartment kept flickering, as if warning me. I printed bank statements, taped them to the wall, scribbled in a notebook. This fall, my sister took me from inside my own dreams. My credit report showed 4 credit cards opened in my name. A luxury car insurance loan for a Porsche, a $100,000 personal loan, unpaid. I began collecting evidence, like digging the foundation for a grave I never consented to. That's how it began, one of the most brutal infidelity stories I've ever known. Not the betrayal of love, but of trust, of identity. What would you do if your dream home existed in your name, but was someone else's fantasy built on your stolen life? Stay silent, or fight for your name and your soul. Mirrors don't lie, but when someone steps into your light, they learn to imitate you, your handwriting, your tone, your tilt of the head. And one day you look into the mirror and realize you've been replaced. Not impersonated, replaced. And the scariest part is no one, not even you, noticed the switch until it was too late. I arrive at the bank with shaking hands and a notebook full of sleepless scribbles. The representative, Charles, silver hair, gray suit, polite smile greeted me, but I didn't return it. "Are you Evelyn Carter?" "I am," I said, but silently I added, though someone else could just as easily say that now. The file on the table had a plastic cover and the thickness of a best-selling thriller. Inside it was me, or rather, a version of me that someone else had built. The signature, nearly perfect. The email, off by just one number. The pay stubs, scanned from my real job. My credit score, crashed from 760 to 510 in 3 months. I flipped through each page like I was identifying my own body after a fire. I couldn't tell what was real anymore because the lie had been constructed from pieces of my actual life. Charles watched me with a mix of sympathy and suspicion. "You didn't sign these documents?" "No, my voice was dry. But the signature looks right. Even the curve in the V, it's the way I've written it since 3rd grade. This could be an internal case of sophisticated fraud," he offered gently. "Do you have any suspects in mind?" I didn't answer, because to say her name, Serena Carter, was to admit that my own sister had clawed into my identity, turned the pages of my life, and used them as her script. I walked out of that bank not remembering what forms I'd signed. I drifted past laughing people in cafes, past ridiculous graffiti murals. Everything looked too normal compared to the explosion happening inside me. That night, my apartment lights wouldn't stop flickering. It wasn't just faulty wiring. It felt like a mirror of my own cracked sense of reality. I started taping statements to my walls. Each one felt like a charge sheet. I wrote short entries in my journal. This isn't a true infidelity story anymore. It's a photocopy of a life being shredded. I thought about Serena, about all the times she said, "You should aim higher, Evelyn. You could have more." I thought she said it out of love, but now I see. Some cheating wife stories aren't about husbands. They're about sisters who sneak into your role, wear your name, and play it so well that nobody questions the act. I was living inside the strangest kind of cheating story. One of those stories cheating that had no steamy affair, no secret texts, only forged mortgages and a twisted version of me on paper. If you looked in the mirror and saw someone else living your life, would you smash the glass or shatter the silence that let it happen in the first place? Family can be the safest place or the darkest shadow. Some wounds don't bleed, but they leave scars on your identity. When the one who betrays you shares your last name, you don't just lose your name, you lose your definition of trust. And sometimes, healing begins not with forgiveness, but with exposing the ghost behind the bloodline. I started doing something I never thought I'd have to do, investigate my own blood. Not with screaming, not with tears, but with evidence, with action, with becoming someone else, an Evelyn Carter who refused to stay invisible. I found Dr. Priya Mehta, a signature analyst who once exposed a forgery ring inside the CIA. She flipped through every page, every signature, every line of ink as if dissecting a soul stitched together by lies. "See this!" She pointed to the harsh drag on the T. "This isn't natural. This is mimicry. Technically accurate, but it has no pulse, no rhythm." I nodded. My throat tightened. She'd confirmed what I feared most and needed to hear. I had been stolen. I began compiling everything. Journals, printed bank statements, IP logs, fake emails, screenshots of credit reports, unopened accounts. Each piece was something I had never given to anyone. Yet now, they were torn from me to build a house I'd never lived in, but was being held responsible for. When I filed my case with the Baltimore Economic Crimes Division, the officer assigned was Detective Rosa Delgado. Her face was firm, but her eyes, they understood invisible bruises. "I've seen a lot of identity theft," Rosa said, "but rarely does the thief share your DNA. Are you ready for this?" "I have no choice," I told her. "I'm not here to beg for my name back. I'm here to reclaim the right to exist as myself." That was when things began to shift. Not easily. No applause. But every piece of evidence I submitted felt like laying bricks, rebuilding a life from scratch. I began to call it human revenge. Not the old, tired kind fueled by anger, but the resurrection of someone who had been erased, frame by frame. I looked back at old family photos, Sunday dinners, Serena's smile, Mom's crab cakes. Now they look like carefully staged scenes from family drama stories. Look closer, and you'd see it. Ghosts behind the warm lights. And they bore the Carter name. I remembered what my grandmother once told me. You don't get to choose who shares your last name, but you can choose not to follow them into hell. When the ghost shares your last name, will you run, or will you become the one who lights the darkness with truth? Light doesn't fall from heaven. It's made when you have no choice but to become the only source of brightness in a dark room. No one rescues you from the shadows until you strike the match yourself with trembling hands and whisper, "I am worth being seen." I don't remember the exact moment I stopped being afraid. Maybe it was when I printed the IP log and wrote Serena beside it. Maybe it was when I stood under a street lamp, Baltimore wind cutting across my cheek, and realized the darkness was no longer where I suffered. It was where I started to act. I called a lawyer. She was young, brown-skinned, voice low and steady. eyes like she could see through every mask I ever wore. She said, "Nobody teaches us how to protect ourselves from family betrayal, but truth doesn't need a birth certificate to exist." I turned on every light in my apartment, even the one on the balcony, though no one would see it. Light for me was no longer just about seeing. It was about being, about refusing to be erased from the story titled Family. I recorded every call, logged every junk letter from banks, filed reports to the state attorney's office. I wasn't just surviving. I was hunting. Inside the fire that could have burned me down, I found a new kind of burning revenge, not one that melts trust, but reforges your spine. I became a version of myself my mother never imagined, and Serena was never ready to face. I went to the hospital and submitted a request for extended leave. When my supervisor asked why, I looked him in the eye and said, "Because I need to fight for the name you write on every newborn's ID band. Yet the banks are now using it to take money I didn't spend." He nodded, didn't ask again. That night, I came home and looked into the mirror, not to check my lipstick or the shadows under my eyes, but to confirm I'm still here. Evelyn Carter. She isn't dead. She's just learning how to fight. My family used to be warm. Sunday crab cakes from Mom. Family tales from Grandma about war, about miracles. But no one told me the darker tales. No one told me how to survive when your own bloodline lies. Now I know. Anger isn't the enemy. Silence is. And I choose not to be silent. I wrote on the mirror, "Not all light comes from the sky. Some is lit from courage. And I am that fire. If no one lights the way for you, do you have the courage to be the first flame? Even when your hands are shaking." Storms always begin with a whisper, a glance, a flicker of lightning in someone's eyes. But sometimes, right in the middle of the chaos, you hear a voice rise, not a scream, but a steady truth cutting through the wind. And when that voice is yours, everything around you starts to change color. Dinner that day was at my parents' old wooden house in Annapolis, the same house where I once spent Christmas sipping hot chocolate and listening to Marvin Gaye. But that night, the air felt cold, not from the weather, but from the glances. Serena was late. Of course. She arrived in an ivory dress, like sin could be dissolved by designer fabric. My parents smiled stiffly. The meal began with a prayer. But to me, it wasn't a blessing. It was a countdown. "Why aren't you eating, sweetheart?" my mother asked. I set my fork down, softly, but it hit the plate like a bomb inside my chest. "Because I can't swallow a family dinner," I said. "Well, someone at this table has stolen my identity, taken out loans in my name, opened fake bank accounts, and everyone else is pretending nothing happened." The silence cracked like glass under pressure. Dad looked at me, then at Serena. Serena stayed calm, like she was waiting for the next scene in one of those cheating stories she had directed herself. "What are you even talking about?" she said, her voice a mix of innocence and menace. I took out my phone, held it up. IP logs, signatures, loan documents, each one a bullet aimed at her perfectly polished mask. "Is this your version of hidden revenge?" I asked. A sweet, quiet plan to punish the little sister who never got famous. Mom cried. Dad stood, but said nothing. That's when I realized silence is also a form of betrayal. I didn't expect them to defend me. I just wanted them to hear me, to know that in every family, there's someone who's been screaming silently for years. And today I wasn't screaming. I was speaking, clearly, calmly, like the first wind that signals a storm. I laid it all out, each lie Serena had told, each carefully posed family photo masking the fractures underneath. The family tales Grandma used to tell by the fireplace, now had a chapter that had never been spoken. I don't want reconciliation, I said. I want freedom. And if that makes this whole family uncomfortable, then remember, I stayed quiet long enough for everyone else to feel comfortable. That night, I left the table with shaking legs, but a steady heart. Behind me, I heard my mother call my name, but I didn't turn back, because the first voice in the storm shouldn't go silent just because others aren't ready to listen. When you're the only one who sees the truth at the family table, will you stay quiet for peace, or speak out to protect your peace of self? Some trials don't happen in courtrooms. They take place at the dinner table, under kitchen lights, between the clinks of silverware and the screams inside silences, where guilt doesn't need a judge and evidence lives in memory. There, the betrayer doesn't need to be sentenced, just forced to listen. I returned to the house where it all began, not to apologize, not to reconcile, but to clarify, to end a cycle of betrayal stories I never wrote, but was forced to live. Dad called it a chance for the family to talk like adults. Mom cooked my favorite stew, but the scent no longer comforted me. It felt like perfume sprayed on a corpse, covering the death of trust. Serena sat across from me. Same white dress, same composed smile. She thought she'd win, with our parents sitting on either side like an invisible jury. But I wasn't there to argue. I came to present evidence. I placed the thick folder on the table. Each page was a cut, not on skin but through heart. Fake bank statements, car purchase receipts in my name, real estate emails from Evelyn.Carter@biz, an address I never created. This is a version of a true infidelity story, I said. Except instead of cheating in a marriage, it happened inside this family. And I'm the one who got betrayed. Serena laughed. Soft. Artificial. But her hand trembled on her wine glass. You're imagining things, she said. I didn't respond. I slid the handwriting analysis toward my father. The expert confirmed this signature was forged. The forger mimicked my writing habits like a weapon. Then I looked straight at my mother. The real question is, will you trust the daughter you've known for 34 years, or the silence of a person sitting next to you? The kitchen went quiet, like a courtroom without a gavel. Dad cleared his throat. Mom bit her lip. Serena scanned the room like looking for a hidden camera. I didn't need their defense. I needed their witness. Every time she said, I love you, it was setting up the next takedown. Every time she asked to borrow my ID, it was another stab. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Truth carries its own volume. I stood up. I didn't come to reclaim my sister. I came to reclaim myself. That night, I went home, opened my laptop, and submitted every document to the federal fraud unit. No hesitation. No shaking hands. I knew this wasn't just another entry in America's infidelity stories. It was the rebirth of a stolen identity. When your family becomes the jury, and you're the defendant of a crime you never committed, will you stay silent, or become your own last line of defense? The worst kind of thief doesn't break in at midnight. They once called you blood, then quietly stole everything you thought was yours, your name, your past, even your voice. And when you finally see it for what it is, you're not just facing loss, you're staring directly into the face of your once blind trust. After submitting my case to the feds, I thought I might catch a breath. But justice doesn't arrive like it does on TV. It doesn't knock with a shiny badge. It creeps in through persistence, waking up every day wondering, do I still have a name today? I kept meeting with my attorney, printing more files, logging every shady transaction and spammy bank email. But something inside me shifted. I was no longer seeking justice just for revenge. I was trying to find myself again, buried beneath the wreckage. One morning, I got an email from the Financial Crimes Unit. We request Evelyn Carter's presence for further statement review. Private meeting. No prior notice. I showed up. The room was cold, like trust recently murdered. Detective Rosa was waiting, and on the table was Serena. She looked at me, no flinch, no aggression. Just a strange calm, like someone too used to stealing and never being caught. I sat across from her. I didn't flinch either. Miss Serena Carter, Rosa began, claims that the documents signed under Evelyn's name were verbally authorized due to their familial relationship. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. One of those cheating wife stories recycled, except this wasn't a lover's betrayal. This was bloodline treachery. I slid a scanned legal authorization across the table. Verbal signatures don't exist. And if they do, they're the kind of cheating that wears designer dresses. Rosa looked at Serena. She went silent for the first time. And I knew. Silence is confession in a room where truth has run out of places to hide. I stood. I didn't come here for another episode in a series of stories cheating. I came to shut the camera off. Cut the scene. Walk out of the damn script. Rosa nodded. The investigation would continue. But for the first time, I wasn't a victim waiting for a verdict. I was the storyteller now. The survivor. The proof that a true infidelity story doesn't always happen between the sheets. Sometimes. It happens across a forged signature and a stolen life. That night, I came home and turned on the balcony light like I always did. But this time, I didn't just see the light. I felt it. If the person who took everything from you shares your last name, do you forgive them because they're family, or do you act because you're a human being who deserves the truth? Some walls aren't made of bricks. They're built from silence. And each time you stay quiet instead of speaking the truth, another brick is laid across your heart. But one day, when you finally break that silence, you're not just tearing down a wall, you're rebuilding yourself. I used to think the strongest wall was home, a roof, blood ties, but in the end I realized the rail wall was the one I built to stay silent, just so no one else got hurt, while I bled behind it. After that meeting with Rosa and Serena, I changed the locks, updated every password, email, bank, health account. I deleted every old contact, even took down the family photos that once sat on my desk. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I was finally redrawing the boundaries, this time for me. I joined a support group for identity theft victims. Mostly women, nurses, teachers, office workers. All of them had one thing in common. They trusted the wrong person too close to home. Under the dim amber light of that meeting room, I told my story for the first time, not as a victim, but as a survivor. My sister stole my name, I said, and instead of apologizing, she called it a misunderstanding. I'm not here for forgiveness. I'm here for clarity. A middle-aged woman put her hand on my shoulder. You just added a chapter to the family drama stories no one wants to talk about. I nodded. I didn't cry. I began rewriting, not just what happened, but how I felt about it. Every morning, I wrote down 3 lines. I have the right to exist. I have the right to be trusted again, even if only by myself. I will not apologize for surviving. I handed over all documents to my lawyer. This time, it wasn't just a financial case. This was the beginning of one of those family revenge stories that doesn't spill blood, but leaves marks that never fade. When reporters started calling, I stayed silent. Not out of fear, but choice. I wouldn't let them spin this into a headline. This wasn't a scandal. This was human revenge. A rise, not to destroy, but to reclaim the reflection stolen from my mirror. I didn't go back to the hospital right away. Instead, I took a night painting class, first time holding a brush in 10 years. I painted my own face. Crooked, unfinished, but honest. Because in a world full of fakes, truth, even when flawed, is the only light no one can steal. If silence was once your shelter, but also the reason someone hurt you, will you stay behind that wall or tear it down and rebuild with your own voice? The deepest wounds are often the unseen ones. When betrayal comes from blood relatives, it tears not only flesh but pierces the soul. But those wounds cannot remain silent pain. They need to be named, acknowledged, so we can begin the journey of healing and rebirth. Weeks have passed since I handed all my evidence to justice, not for revenge, but to name the truth. Because revenge is not just a fire burning those who hurt you, but a guiding light for yourself. My story, a family betrayed, is no longer a secret. It's told through indictments, testimonies, and the teary eyes of loved ones in the courtroom. On trial day, I wore my nurse's blouse unmasked. This is the real me, the one who's healed hundreds of newborns and now heals my own soul. Serena stood across from me, no longer proud. Her eyes were silent, weighing every word I was about to speak. I recounted it all, from borrowed IDs, forged contracts, to how she used my name to borrow hundreds of thousands, living a life that wasn't mine. Every detail was a stab, but I didn't falter. I'm rebuilding myself, brick by brick. Beside me, my lawyer gently squeezed my hand. I felt strength from that presence, not reckless revenge, but persistence and integrity. Family and friends in attendance couldn't hide their discomfort. They saw a different Evelyn, not the fragile girl they once knew, but a woman forged in steel, no longer overshadowed by darkness. I looked Serena straight in the eye and said, "You didn't just steal my name. You took my trust, my safety, and my right to be myself. But today I stand here to say, those wounds must be named, and they must heal. This trial isn't the end. It's the start of a new chapter, where I'm no longer the victim but the storyteller of family tales that are real, painful yet full of hope. I know revenge isn't just about burning the past, but building a future where my name is spoken with respect, and I'm no longer stolen from by those closest to me. If your deepest wounds are caused by those closest to you, will you let them remain silent like shadows, or will you name them with the light of truth and renewal? A real home isn't built from bricks or mortar. It's built on a foundation of truth, no matter how painful that truth may be. When you choose to rebuild your life on truth, you're erecting a fortress of resilience, not just to fight the darkness, but to light the path ahead. After the trial, life didn't go back to what it was. I knew I had crossed the boundary of ordinary revenge stories. This wasn't a story of revenge in the shadows. It was a purposeful rebirth, built on an undeniable foundation of truth. I moved into a new apartment, smaller, not flashy, but flooded with natural light. There, I began reconstructing the pieces of my life Serena had taken, not with old keepsakes, but with legal knowledge, perseverance, and self-love. I enrolled in classes on finance, law, and psychology to understand the rules no one had taught me before. I started a blog to share my story, not to wallow in pain, but to shine a light for those whose names have been hidden in the dark. One reader commented, "Your story is one of the deepest family tales I've ever heard. I'm also losing my name, my voice in my own family." I replied, "No one has the right to steal your story. That's the most insidious form of hidden revenge, but it's one we can defeat by speaking out and standing up." Every day, I rewrote my history in my own way. I learned to accept my scars, not to hide them, but to turn them into marks of strength. I learned to forgive, not Serena, but myself, so I wouldn't remain trapped in the past. Slowly, I stopped being a shadow in someone else's story. I became the main character in my own family drama stories. I didn't need spotlight or applause. I just needed to live honestly and strongly. One day, standing before the mirror in my new home, I wrote on the fog glass, "Truth is the foundation, and I am the architect of my life." I know now. Revenge isn't just retaliation, it's restoration. It's the fire that burns away the darkness inside, leaving only the light of who you truly are. When your life story has been stolen, will you remain a victim in the shadows, or will you build a new home on the foundation of truth in yourself? There are shadows not meant for shelter but for imprisonment. When those closest to you turn your home into a cage, betrayal doesn't just tear your heart, it locks up your soul. And you have to choose to keep living in that darkness or to break free and find your own light again. When everything hit rock bottom, I realized the darkness wasn't my home. It was just a prison where Serena and betrayal turned my dreams, my name, and my freedom into merchandise to be sold. I remember those peaceful days that felt unbreakable, my attic apartment by Patterson Park, distant ambulance sirens, nights singing lullabies to premature babies struggling to breathe. But everything I built has now faded, overshadowed by the long shadow of betrayal stories drawn by the very people I trusted. What we called family has become a place filled with secrets and heavy silence. Serena isn't just my sister. She's the one living my life, using my name to borrow money, open accounts, and separate me from my own life. I can't accept that darkness as home. I have to do something, not for blind revenge, but to reignite my life, reclaim my name, and uncover the hidden truth. I started seeking support from the community. Second Identity, where I met others whose identities were stolen by their own families. People like me, lost in true infidelity stories without words, only cruel actions. I learned to rebuild the life Serena took piece by piece. From financial recovery, restoring my reputation, to finding my voice again through shared stories. But most importantly, I learned not to fear the dark anymore. Not because I'm no longer threatened, but because I know how to light the smallest flames from courage, truth, and action. On my blog, I wrote, "In family tales, not everyone is a hero or a betrayer, but everyone has the right to choose a path of light." One day, I stood in front of the mirror. My eyes no longer filled with fear, but with strength and resolve. The darkness may chase me, but it will never consume me. When your home turns into darkness, will you keep enduring, or will you become the flame that burns away all concealment and betrayal? There are houses that don't need mirrors to reflect because no shattered shadows live inside them. When you build your life on truth and resilience, you stop fearing broken glass or old cheating stories. You become the creator of light, not the one merely reflected. I once believed family was the one thing that could never break. But Serena taught me that some true infidelity stories don't happen far away. They unfold deep within blood ties, on the foundation of betrayed trust. The home I once lived in, dreamed of for the future, no longer holds the shards of past broken mirrors. I've learned to remove those fragments, refusing to let them pierce my heart again. I moved into a small cottage, silver-shingled beneath the moonlight. Outside, there's darkness, but inside, every room is flooded with natural light, not from artificial bulbs, but from the clarity I built for myself. Here, I no longer hide the scars left by betrayal stories. I keep a journal, not just recounting the betrayals, but documenting the daily rebuilding of trust and self-worth. I started an online course, sharing my story with the world, not to complain, but to inspire those who've been silenced, weighed down by cheating wife stories. A young girl named Sophie, Serena's daughter, once messaged me, "Miss Evelyn, why haven't you told the story of the white chrysanthemums this season?" I replied, White chrysanthemums bloom only when the skies are truly calm. And so will you. It just takes time to blossom. I realized resurrection isn't a leap. It's breath by breath, small acts every day. From tidying my room, tending lavender plants, to lighting a nighttime lamp. I am no longer the girl whose identity was stolen, but the woman rewriting her story with words no longer soaked in pain, but filled with hope and strength. Every morning I look into the mirror and say, this is the house without broken mirrors. Here, I'm the only one reflected. Revenge is not just retaliation. It's the process of choosing to live authentically, powerfully, refusing to be crushed by any cheating story ever again. When you no longer fear the shattered pieces of your past, will you choose to stay hidden in the dark or become the light builder of a house without broken mirrors? Revenge isn't always a burning fire or a haunting curse. Sometimes, light is the best revenge when you use truth to illuminate the darkness and strength to turn pain into action. Because light is the gift no one can take away. My life was stolen silently by my closest kin, Serena, who turned me into a nameless ghost. But now I stand here, not to recount pain, but to tell a story of rebirth, a journey soaked with sweat, tears, and fierce perseverance. I don't choose revenge through destruction, but by lighting up the darkest corners of my life. Every blog post, every sharing session, every time I stand before a crowd, I lay down a brick in rebuilding my spiritual home. This isn't just another family drama story in the headlines. It's the story of a woman stepping out of darkness into the light, wielding truth not to destroy others, but to free herself. I recall Dr. Hadley's words, my therapist. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's releasing the burden to live. And I understand that true revenge isn't retaliation, it's acceptance, healing, and moving forward. The day I got approved for my first mortgage loan under my real name, that wasn't a victory over Serena. It was a victory for myself. A milestone, a proof of rising from the ashes. I held a small gathering with others who suffered identity theft, a small but resilient community. I told my story and listened to theirs, a collective strength of those who refused to be broken. In the late afternoon light, I stood by my new window, gazing at the brilliant Baltimore sky. I am no longer a victim. I am the flame. I am the light. And I know this. Light is the best revenge. Because when you shine, darkness cannot survive. When every path of revenge leads to destruction, do you have the courage to choose the light and turn truth into a freeing flame?